to the Keys to Therapy. Today's episode is going to be the top 5 things you should do when you're starting a private practice. So there's a million steps to do before you start your private practice, but I feel like these 5 are the most important, and these are exactly where you should start when you are deciding what you want your practice to look like. I think it can be very overwhelming because there's so many resources out there, and a lot of them are great. I mean, I know I used a lot of different free resources and a couple paid ones too to be able to figure out like the best ways to build the practice that I wanted to build. But a lot of times they're all over the place, or you're getting a lot of conflicting views on things, or it just seems like there's like so many steps that you don't even know where to start. So maybe today will help streamline a little bit of that for you. So make it like quick and to the point, and let's get started. So the first step I would say would be to develop your niche, whatever. But really figure out what type of clients you want to see. Who do you do your best work with, right? Because a lot of times when people want to be in private practice, some of it is business related, right? Like maybe wanting to have your own thing, right? Tired of working for other people, or you just want to be in charge, or it's been a dream of yours, or whatever else. But really, I think for most people, private practice is like a chance for you to really get to see who you want to see when you want to see them, and to do your best work with clients that you know you do your best work with. I feel like most places that you'll work, you won't have very much of a choice over the types of clients that you get or who you have to see. So like hospitals, a lot of times like community mental health, residential, any type of program, honestly, like you don't get a choice of the clients that you see. And even sometimes like certain group practices, you might not get much of a choice, or different agencies. It's kind of like, well, this is who we put you with. I mean, I know even when I worked with the military, I didn't get a choice. I just had random people put on my schedule all the time, and I had to do their intake. And sometimes I was able to refer them out, but I would really have to explain and specify the reasons behind that. And they just expected everybody at almost every job I've been at, they just kind of expect you to be a generalist. And it's like, well, they're here, so somebody needs to see them, so why not you? Or you'll have the people who will say like, well, it'll help build your skills, or all of that type of stuff. And even if some of that is true, at a certain point in your career and in your life, you know who you want to work with, you know who you do your best work with, you know which clients fill you up, and you feel energized by those sessions. So I think it's really helpful to think about what that niche is going to be. And it might not be super specific to start. Maybe you know that you want to work with teenagers, right? And that's who you want to see. But over time, it starts to be teenagers who have experienced grief, or teenagers who are athletes, or something that's a little bit more specialized. And that's cool. Like, you can narrow it down. That's what's great about private practices, it's yours. So you can change it and move things around and further specialize or generalize a little bit more, whatever else as time goes on. But I think you really should think through where you've worked, who you've worked with, and figure out what is this practice going to be focused on. It's shown too that practices that have a niche tend to do better overall at times than generalist ones, or therapists that have a niche, whatever, because you'll have clients who will say like, I read your website, or I read your psych today, or whatever it is, and that sounded just like me. And they're going to be more willing to book with you. They're going to be more willing to stick with you sometimes because they know that you get them. And it's not to say that like if you have an itch, I think some therapists are scared that like if you have that, then it means like you're not going to get to see any other clients. It's like, no, there's going to be different clients of maybe different age ranges, or different genders than you thought, or different life stages than you anticipated, that some of that copy still resonates, or they just really like whatever it is that you're doing, a modality you use, or whatever else, that they decide that that's what they want to go after. But for the most part, it's helpful, I think, for you also to make sure to stay with the clients that you do your best work with, to narrow that down a little bit into having that focus, so that you don't end up taking like any and every client coming your way to start, because that scarcity mindset gets a lot of therapists to begin with. So if you already have it identified of like who you're trying to see, that might help you set boundaries with yourself for who you're taking on, so that you're only taking on those good fits, the people that you know you're a good fit for, instead of just taking anybody you could see. So definitely look into that. I think the second thing to figure out is what that payment process is going to look like. So are you going to be private pay, or are you going to take insurance? I have other videos on the pros and cons of each of those, and there's really not like a right or wrong way to go about that, but I think it would be really helpful for you to think through and possibly watch those if you don't know much about it, but think through each of those models and decide what fits you best personally. And of course you have to factor in the professional part, but I think where a lot of therapists go wrong is they spend so much time building a practice that they think is going to work for clients, that they think is what they should be doing, or they're worried about like the stigma of something or how things will seem to other therapists. And then you just end up building an agency or a place that's exactly like what you left. So you really need to focus on what model works best for you and go with that. And I'm not going to get into it all because I have a video on being a private pay practice owner and also being an insurance-based practice owner. And I think it would be helpful to really look into each of those and decide what fits you the best and your needs the best, right? Because again, this private practice is supposed to be what works for you, what you want for your life. Don't work for it, make it work for you. So the third thing I would say is to decide if you want to be telehealth or if you want to do an in-person practice. Some people do a hybrid, and that's cool too. I think starting out sometimes it's easier to do telehealth because you have a lot less expenses. You're not paying for rent, you're not paying for internet somewhere, you're not paying for like general liability insurance for the facility or office you're in. There's just like a lot of benefits to being telehealth. So if expenses are something you're trying to be very cautious about, or potentially you're starting all the way from scratch, it might be a good idea to start telehealth, or possibly like rent an office from somebody for a couple hours or a day a week versus signing an entire lease. Now, if you are coming from a place that you have a full caseload that's following you and you're really set up, or you feel very strongly about needing to be in person, then yeah, go ahead and rent the space. But just understand, like, financially the obligations that will put you under to sign a lease. So decide pretty quickly, like, do you want to be virtual, do you want to be in person, or do you want to have a hybrid model? Because that will help you figure out, again, expenses, marketing. Even if you're telehealth, you have different ways of marketing than you would if you are in person, networking, stuff like that. So I would make that a priority as well. Again, third on the list. The fourth on the list would be, what type of record keeping thing are you going to do? So most people nowadays don't use paper, and some do, like, or have a couple maybe preferences, like maybe their notes are handwritten, or their intake paperwork they're all in person, so they have people filling it out in their waiting room or whatever else. But for the most part, therapists all use some sort of electronic health record or system. So I've known therapists that have used Google, and they already pay like the $6 or whatever a month for Google Workspace. So they have ways of having protection there with privacy. So you can have different forms sent out and things like that if you want to keep it like as cheap as possible. But you also need some sort of payment processor if you do that. A lot of electronic health records already have a payment processor built in. So you pay the one fee and then everything's in there. So like I use Simple Practice, and they have Stripe built into that, and it just makes it easier. I know some therapists who use Google or something else, and they use IV Pay or just some other kind of processing system. But think through, how are you going to keep records? How are you going to schedule clients? How are you going to send reminders? If you're going to send reminders, how do you have them sign documentation? How do you send them documentation privately, message with them, whatever other stuff, accept payment? So a lot of times having an electronic health record is going to be key, right? Because if you're thinking through the types of clients you have, how they're going to be paying you, which way you're going to see them, well, then you really need to figure out, how are you keeping all of these notes and records together? So look into the EHR for sure. A lot of therapy Facebook groups have different compare and contrasts with what different systems they use. So do some research, use a search bar in some of those. I know some different people on YouTube have covered that too, because some use different ones, or on podcasts. So just search and do your research and figure out what works best for you. And then the last piece is, how are you getting paid? Right? Like, a lot of us, pretty much, probably like 99% of us work because we have to work. We need money. We have stuff we need to pay for. And this is the side of things that sometimes can feel a little bit different for therapists, because you'll have people say, like, I didn't go into this field to make money and whatever, but like, you expect to get paid because you're providing a service and you should get paid. So, and other fields don't say that. So you want to make sure that you have some sort of system in place for how you are going to pay yourself. Now, there's different ways of doing that. You're most likely going to need some kind of accountant, some kind of like CPA, possibly a bookkeeper, or some system like QuickBooks or something that you're paying that can help you keep track of all the bookkeeping. You're going to be responsible for paying your own taxes. So you're going to need a system, whether it's an Excel spreadsheet, like whatever it is that you decide. Some people tend to pay for certain like websites and systems. Some people will pay their accountants to handle all of that stuff for them. So it's whatever works best for you. But I know the system I use is called Profit First, and I'll probably do my next video on that actually. But it's basically a system where I do a modified version, but you have multiple types of business accounts, and so all the money goes into one, and then you separate it into other ones. So taxes and business savings and expenses and stuff like that. So then that way everything is got its place. But you figure out what works best for you. So depending on what type of business you file to, there's different ways that you sort of have to pay yourself. So looking into that as well. But I definitely think that needs to be in that top 5 as that final piece. Is you've got everything else laid out for how your practice is going to go and clients are taken care of potentially. But how are you going to pay yourself? And that's also one of the things that people get in the most trouble for, is they don't know how to pay themselves. So they either don't pay themselves and all that money just sits there, or they get like a huge tax bill at the end of the year because they didn't know to pay quarterly taxes, which you have to do if you're self-employed. Like the money stuff is really what's going to mess people up. And I think most everybody is the most nervous about the payment piece of it. So definitely figure out what that system is going to look like for you so that you can get paid and you can pay your taxes and you can just have a very like well-oiled machine when it comes to your practice, so that you're not stressing about all of that stuff either every week, every 2 weeks, every quarter, like whatever else, to pay yourself or to pay your taxes. So I would definitely have that in place sooner than later. I know this is like a very, very quick video, because I just wanted to lay out what I think the top 5 steps are and what I would focus on if I was building my practice again from the ground up. But I have videos on, like I said, niche. There's an older one about that. So the insurance ones, I've talked about being telehealth in some previous videos, so that may be something to dive into in a future one. But I think these top 5 tips will be the biggest ones to get you started. So I would go from there, narrow those down, and build your practice up from there. But good luck. I think if you've got it in you to be a practice owner, you should definitely pursue that and see how it goes. But be prepared, because most of us were not taught anything related to business, and this whole world is new. And even though you might know the therapy part, like some of the terms I've mentioned, you might not be familiar with, like quarterly taxes or Profit First or EHRs or things like that are all pieces of the business. So educate yourself on them so you can feel as confident as possible going into this next venture. But good luck. Subscribe below so you can stay on top of future episodes, and I will see you all next time.